Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem to get on Daf Chof Vov Amud Beis, the new Mishnah at the top. The paragraph is discussing how do we determine which Kohanim of that Beis Av perform the Avodah throughout the year. To which the Mishnah is explained there are 4 different payosos, 4 different times when the Kohanim assemble and they cast lots. The first payos is to determine who performs the avodah of Trumas Hadeshen. The second payos deals with casting lots for 13 different avodos, beginning with one who's sheichet, the korban tamid, and then leading up to 9 different parts of the korban tamid that are brought and put on the kevesh of the mizbeach. The third payos discusses the Ketores, who is Zoichet to that. And the fourth payos tells us, though that Kohen was going to determine who brings up all of those Evarim that are already on the Kevesh up to the Mizbech and burns those Evarim. Our Mishnah continues and discusses during the year, when do we say there are different amounts of Kohanim who perform the Korban Tamid? Depends on the time of the year. Tamid Karev B'Tisha Be'asara, be'achadasar, be'shnemasar, lo yipochev lo yoser. Our Mishnah begins by saying there are different amounts of kohanim who perform the korban tamid depending on when during the year. Sometimes it's 9 and sometimes it's 10. Sometimes it could be 11 and even 12, but not more than 12 and not less than 9. Ketzad asked the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, atzmoi betes. That which we said in the Payis Shlishi, that's 9. Now the 9 again refer to the latter 9 of the bringing up to the Kevesh ve'elach. Therefore it excludes the Shchita and the Zrikas Hadam. It only includes those 9 that are beginning from the bringing those Evarim to the Kevesh. Bechag biyad echad tzloichi shel mayim harei kan asara. During the Chag, referring to Sukkis, when there's Nisuch HaMayim, there's an additional Kohen who is Zoiche in the Payis to then bring the water for the Nisuch HaMayim in a flask. Now, this Kohen is determined that once the winner of the second Payis, who does the Shechita, so we said that all of the other Avodas are determined by who is on the right of him, does the next Avodah of the Zrikas Adam, the right of that one does the next avodah, and so on until you get to this, in this case, the 10th, and that will be the bringing up of the water for Nisuch HaMayim on Sukkis. The Mishnah continues, Bein ha'arboim bechadasar, hu atzmo v'tisho, v'shnayim biyadim shnei gezirei eitzim. The Bein ha'arboim, that korban tamid, has indeed 11 kohanim. It has the 9 that we mentioned before. It has also 2 additional ones who are bringing 2 different blocks of wood to put on the pyre of the Mizbeach. B'Shabbos b'Chadasar. On Shabbos, there is even an additional one. There's 12. Hu atzmo b'Tisha, the 9 that we mentioned before. V'shnayim b'yadam shnei b'zichei levoina shel lechem haponim. And you have an additional 2 that are for the zichei ha-levoina. Those are the spoons that have the levoina on the shulchan next to the lechem haponim. That when the lechem haponim are taken and then switched, and then they are replenished with the new lechem haponim, so the shtei zichei levona are then burnt on the mizbeach, the levoina. And then the kohanim who are leaving that mishmar, they partake in the lechem haponim that was taken off that shulchan. Ubeshabbos shebetoich hachag biyad echad tzloichish shel mayim. Here we have the 12 when it comes to Shabbos on Sukkos. So then we have an additional one, which is one carrying the tzluchi shel mayim. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Abba v'yitem Rabbi Mar Chamo Bar Chamo v'yitem Rabbi Yochanan In regards to the Nisuch HaMayim that's performed on Sukkot, Rabbi Yochanan teaches us it's only performed during the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar. It's not performed during Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim. Mimai, from where do we know? Explains the Gemara, Midiktani, Ubeshabis Shebetoich HaChag, Biyad Echad Tzloichi Shel Mayim. The fact that our Mishnah says that on the Shabbos of Sukkot, there'll be the amount of 12 different Kohanim performing the Avodah. The fact that it had to bring the case of Shabbos, showing that's going to be where there's going to be 12, because we have the 9 that we mentioned, plus the 2 of the Zikhe Lavoina, plus the 12th, which is going to be the Tzluchi Shel Mayim. So it's mashma, only there'll be 12. But on Ben HaArboim, when we had 11, where we'd have it on Sukkot, there won't be a 12th, because we do not do Nisuch HaMayim in the afternoon with the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim. V'yisaka daiter b'Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim menaschim b'chol nami mishkachas lo. We'd also have a case of 12 in the case of Ben HaArboim during Sukkot. Elamai, you see that we do not bring the Nisuch HaMayim in the afternoon. It's only during the Tamid Shel Shachar. Omer Rav Ashi, af ana nami tanino. We also learn this in a Mishnah in Sukkah. Ulemenasech, it says the one who is then performing the Nisuch HaMayim, Oimer loy hagba yodecha. We say to him, lift up your hands so we can see that you pour the flask of water into the silver bowl that's on top of the Mizbeach. Shepam achas nisech al gabe raglov v'ragamu kol ha'am be'esroi gehen. Because one time there was a tzeduki who poured the mayim from the flask onto his feet, so it wouldn't go into the Mizbeach to poistil the avodah. Why? Tzedukim, since they only follow the Torah Shebichsav and they are koifer in the Torah Sheba'al Peh, and it's only through the Torah Sheba'al Peh that we have a Mesara, that there's Nisuch HaMayim during Sukkot. So therefore, he poured it on his foot, whereby all those who were present took their esrogim and pelted him with their esrogim. So we see over here the fact that they pelted him with esrogim would have been during the zman of the netilas lulav, which is in the morning. So we see from here Shema Mina indeed that the Nisuch HaMayim is performed dafka in the morning. The Gemara brings the following brayso Tanya. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai Omer minayin letamid shel ben ha'arbaim sheton shnei gezirei eitzim v'shnei kohanim. Where do we know that it's the tamid shel ben ha'arbaim, that there are 2 kohanim who both bring one of the logs of wood? In other words, in the morning, when the shnei gezirei eitzim is brought, it's brought by one kohen, the 2 logs. But in the afternoon, it's brought by 2 kohanim. So how do we know aleph that is brought by 2 kohanim in the afternoon and beis in the afternoon? So explains, Shneimar, it's in the pasuk, ve'arachu eitzim. In the pasuk it says, and they set forth, they arranged the eitzim on the mizbeach. Im eino inin letamid shel shachar. If it's not referring to the tamid shel shachar, dichsi, because it says there, ubir aleh hakoyin eitzim baboker ve'orach aleim. The fact that it says explicitly, Gabe, the Tamid Shel Shachar, that he lit the fire, the kohen, of the eitzim, every morning he then arranged them for the Korban Tamid. Tneu Inyan, the Tamid Shel Ben Arboim. We must say then the first pasuk that says Va'archu ha'eitzim is referring to the Tamid Shel Ben Arboim. Ve'ema, says the Gemara, you have no proof maybe because Idi v'Idi b'Tamid Shel Shachar, maybe both psukim are reference to Tamid Shel Shachar. In other words, that you bring the 2 sets of the Shnei Gezirei Eitzim. Ve'omar Rachmana Ovid v'Hadar Ovid. Im Kain, asked the Gemara, name a kro, then let the pasuk say ubir. It should say twice ubir. Just like it says by the Tamid Shel Shachar explicitly, ubir aleh kohen eitzim baboker, that he lit every morning the eitzim, then it should use the same terminology in regards to the other pasuk. It should say v'bi'er or bi'aru eitzim in plural. The fact that it doesn't say that is mashma that we're talking about 2 different things. the Tamishal Shachar as well as the Tamishal Ben Haraboyim? Answer the Gemara, no, you have no proof because because of Rachmana Ubi'er, if you use the word Ubi'er, as it does in the morning, you'll say the first pasuk is also referring to the morning and you use the word Bi'er, then Havamina Chad in Trei Loi. I might think that it's only one Kohen that performs the Shtei Gizirei Eitzim, but not two. Kamashman, the Navid Chav and Navid Trei. Therefore, it teaches us a singular form of the pasuk of Bi'er and a plural form when it says V'arachu. Ask the Gemara, okay, name a crow Ubi'er Ubi'aru. Then why don't you stay again consistent with the terminology? Just change from singular to plural. Ubi'er, that the singular kohen lights the eitzim every morning, and then say he then has a second set of eitzim, but it's not just him; it's two kohanim that light those two gezirei eitzim. Inami, says the Gemara, then va'ara or va'arach va'arakoi. The Gemara asks the question: if it's true, then you want to be consistent. Then be consistent with bi'ar bi'aro or v'arach v'arakoi, using the same terminology, just singular to plural. My ubi'ar v'arakoi. Why change the name of essentially the same thing? Lighting and arranging the wood to light means the same thing. Why did you use different terminology? Shma'amina kideko amrinon. It must be, says Rav Shimon Yochai, that it's like we said, indeed, that it is in fact one kohen who performs the Shtei Gizerei Eitzim in the morning of Tamishal Shachar, and two kohanim that perform the Shtei Gizerei Eitzim in Tamishal Ben Harboyim, that in the afternoon each one holds and places the log individually and separately. Gemara now brings a brisa that's consistent with our Mishnah Tani Rabbi Chia Pius. Rabbi Chia taught by the pious by casting lots. Pa'amim yagimol pa'amim. In other words, we saw before in our pious sheni that there are 13 different kohanim performing those avodos, and those they're enlisted in the pious sheni in the previous Mishnah. That's discussing all of the avodah, including the beginning with the shchita and then the zrika. So there are 13 kohanim there. Yud dalid pa'amim, sometimes it's 14. Tesva pa'amim, sometimes it's 15. And pa'amim it's tezayin, sometimes it's 16. Ask the Gemara, v'hatanya, we have a brisa that says Yud zayin, sometimes there's 17. And over here, this brisa that you just quoted, Rabbi Chia, says there's only 16. Explains the Gemara, depends on the Tana. Hahi deloy ki Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, elik Rabbi Yehuda. That which says that there are only 16, the first brisa that we quoted, Rabbi Chia's brisa, that is talking about that it's not like, that's talking like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who says that we do not have a separate pious for a kohen to bring up the parts that are in the kevesh to the mizbeach. Whereas Rav Yehuda will say 17 because he says there is indeed a kohen that is designated to win out the pious to bring up those evarim from the kevesh up to the mizbeach. So that adds an additional kohen. The Mishnah now discusses the classical Korban Talmud is with a keves. Korban Talmud is always with a keves, a 1-year-old keves. So that's the amounts of kohen that we discussed until now in regards to the keves, which is relatively a small animal. Now, the Mishnah discusses other animals that are bigger and the amounts of kohanim that will be performed with those avodos. Says the Mishnah ayil, and ayil is already beyond the 1 year, and says karev be'echadasar, it's brought with 11. Why do we get from 9 to 11? Explains the Mishnah. Habasar bechamisha, the basar that's 5. Hakrevayim v'hasoiles v'hayayim b'shnayim shnayim. The innards, the soiles, that is the amount of flour that's brought, and as well as the amount of the wine for the nisuch, that is 2 each. So therefore you get 5 plus the 6, getting to a total of 11. That's in regards to the ayil. The Mishnah goes on to say about a bigger animal. Here we're talking about a bigger animal, and also a korban oila. Par korev be'esrim va'arbo. A par, an ox, that is brought with 24 different kohanim. The Mishnah now is mefarit. Haroish v'haregel. Here, haroish be'echad, v'haregel b'shnayim. So it's already 3. Ha'oiketz v'haregel. Ha'oiketz b'shnayim v'haregel b'shnayim. Another 4, that's 7. Ha'chazei v'hageiro. Ha'chazei be'echad, v'hageiro b'shloisha. That's another 4. So that's 11. Shtei yodayim. That's the 2 forelegs. B'shnayim, that's 2. So that's 13. Ushtei defonois. The 2 flanks. That's 15. B'shnayim. Hakrevayim. V'hasoiles v'hayayin. B'shloisha shloisha. That's another, each one 3. So that's another 9. 15 plus 9 gives us a 24. Ba'med v'mamuri. And the Mishnah goes on to say, when is this all true? Be'korbanos sibur. When talking about a korbanos sibur, these are the numbers. When it's a keves, or talking about oilos, either it's a keves, or if it's an ayil, or if it's a paro. By korban sibur, then we have all of these different kohanim, depending on which one it is, to do the avodah. Aval bekorban yachid, im rotzu lahakriv makriv. If it's a korban yachid, he can determine the kohen, and that kohen can then do all of these avodas. It doesn't require the payosos that we mentioned before. The Mishnah concludes, Hafshiton ve'nituchon shel elu ve'elu shavin. The hafshiton, when we fillet the skin, ve'nituchon, and then when we dismember the oila into different parts, that, he says, can be performed, says the Mishnah, and the Gemara will explain, that this can be performed by a non-kohen equally. And therefore, that's the conclusion of the Mishnah, that this is not considered to be an avoid of the kohanim, like we mentioned until now, but the hefshet and the nituach can be performed by the non-kohen, the zar.